Just quickly touch on what Fikile Mbalula had to say there.
The DA has once again revealed its anti-transformation agenda.
He keeps using the word transformation, and I'm just not sure what he means by that. Does he mean economic growth that has effectively stagnated for the last decade? Does he mean the masses of people that are unemployed?
Their opposition is instead a desperate attempt to undermine transformation, protect white monopoly capital.
The ANC clearly doesn't understand how economics 101 work. We are in South Africa at a point where our corporate tax rates have become uncompetitive. In OECD countries, the average is 21%. South Africa's at 27%. We have...
Guys, please, in the comments, if you really understand this term that Fikile Mbalula uses, transformation, I would really be appreciative to really understand what he means in the comments. But anyway, just like Mike Burke is actually wondering what the term transformation means as is being used by the ANC, Dr. Mike Burke is actually also explaining with logic and facts on how the ANC's policies have actually brought an economic growth of 0.8% to South Africa. He actually also argues, in his own words anyway, that the ANC doesn't understand economics 101, and that, you know, that the DA really doesn't want to keep embarrassing the ANC, but that it would not kind of like sit back and tolerate sort of like what has been an ANC hegemony to probably passing up these laws like the budget and some of the laws actually, because right now the ANC is in a GNU, a government of national unity, and not in its hegemony. And it's really frustrating. I can hear from Fikile Mbalula as he describes what he argues is the ANC, is the DA's effort to maintain the base of white monopoly capital, and that, you know, the DA is actually trying to disrupt the gains that the ANC has actually gained over the last 30 years as a kind of like drive for transformation, so to speak, and that the DA is using this constant opposition to Minister Godongwana's budget proposals as a means to debate or probably counter the passage of some of the laws like the Bella Act, the Expropriation Without Compensation Act, and some other acts that have actually been against the DA stance in South Africa. And it's intentionally using this argument, so to speak, to debate those laws and not necessarily to really object to this VAT hike by Minister Godongwana as a service to the people of South Africa. So this is how the ANC reasons the DA's constant objection to an increase in taxes by the DA. Let's really listen to Fikile Mbalula describe how the ANC, I think, pictures the DA, you know, in this whole drive. And I'll be back for Mike Burke. Mike Burke is actually, I think there was a comment in this interview where somebody said Mike Burke seems to have a new fan, and, you know, he's breaking down the rhetoric of the ANC and really assigning facts to his explanations in ways that really show probably that, you know, there's a really consistent logic in how the DA really wants to, you know, solve the problem of South Africa, being the fact that Mike Burke argues that the problem of South Africa is not an income problem, it's an expenditure problem, all right? And so the ANC doesn't really want that perspective. The ANC simply is insistent that, you know, the passage of this VAT hike is something that would prop up the economy of South Africa. And the DA says no, that South Africa have been taxed to the teeth. South Africans cannot tolerate any increases in tax anymore, that they want expenditure cuts. So this is the clash now we're actually seeing between the ANC and the DA at this time. Listen to Fikile Mbalula and I'll be back for some analysis.
The DA has once again revealed its anti-transformation agenda by opposing the progressive budget proposal. Their opposition is not based on concerns for fiscal responsibility, but is instead a desperate attempt to undermine transformation, protect white monopoly capital, and roll back the democratic gains made over the past 3 decades. The DA seeks to use the budget process as leverage to renegotiate its role within the GNU, not because it has interests of the people at heart.
Yeah, guys. So in this interview that's going to be following, Koli, who is the journalist from, I think this is Newsroom, right? Yes, this is Newsroom, exactly. So he's in a really intense interview with Dr. Mike Burke, the DA's finance, so to speak, rep or chief, as Mike Burke really rebuffs some of these statements by Fikile Mbalula, arguing that, you know, the ANC really doesn't understand economics. He argues, he calls it economics 101, and that, you know, it's the policies of the ANC over the last 30 years that have resulted in a 0.8% economic growth for the economy of South Africa, and many other thoughts that, you know, he breaks down really with consistent logic. I really enjoy listening to the guy anyway, personally. But you know, he's really countering this ANC perspective, actually arguing that the DA has a much more pragmatic way in which it aims to really raise the capital that the economy needs now to support itself, rather than constantly punishing or increasing the burden of the taxpayer in South Africa, who has actually been taxed to the teeth, according to Mike Burke and the DA here. But anyway, let's quickly listen to Mike Burke rebuff some of these statements by Fikile Mbalula, and I'll really be appreciative if you guys share your thoughts in the comments on what you think Fikile Mbalula understands as transformation, and how far that transformation has actually occurred in South Africa over the last 30 years.
Can I start by getting your standpoint, or should we say your reaction to the ANC saying that you are trying to use the budget in trying to get or renegotiate positions in these transformation laws that I've just mentioned above? Is that indeed your position?
It's a couple of things to unpack there, Koli. First is what exactly we mean with transformation. The ANC has imposed its failed ideology and policies in South Africa, at least for the last 15 years. It's led to unemployment that's now above 30%, and young people not being able to find work, and in some cases, children starving to death. So I'm not exactly sure what they mean by transformation. But if the question is whether the DA insisted in policies that relate to the economy featuring in the budget, then that's absolutely correct. One example is that we insisted that the Cape Town and Richards Bay ports should be devolved and potentially privatized as a matter of urgency because of the chokehold on our economy. Likewise, expropriation without compensation is a deterrent for investors, both foreign and domestic. You cannot viably build a business and environment where one of the core tenets, perhaps the most important tenet of the economy, private property rights, are not respected.
The ANC says your approach to this is tantamount to blackmail, because all of these other positions you are trying to renegotiate have nothing to do with the budget. How do you respond to that?
The ANC clearly doesn't understand how economics 101 work. We are in South Africa at a point where our corporate tax rates have become uncompetitive. In OECD countries, the average is 21%. South Africa is at 27%. We have Scandinavian level income taxes, and in this budget, the pseudo budget that was proposed, we have fiscal creep in that the brackets haven't moved up. And then, of course, the VAT, it'll be 1% over 2 years. The ANC is trying to somehow tax South Africa to prosperity, and South Africans are saying they can't afford anymore. Now, to the point that some of the economic principles we've tied to our budget conversations, again, that is absolutely right. That is as it should be. If we can't get these ports to be some of the better run ports in the country and in the world, where Cape Town is now amongst the worst in the world, and if we can't get private property rights secured, then we will continue to be, along with our corporate tax rates, a very unattractive environment for business, which means we won't be able to create jobs and we won't be able to grow the economy, which is priorities that we've all agreed on.
In the past, in the recent past, I won't say the past, in the recent past, at the time of the initial postponement of the budget, the DA was clear that if there is an increase in VAT, it's going to affect the poor. The criticism now could come back and say, you were unprincipled in your position because you pretended that this VAT increase was intended to cushion the poor, when in actual fact, as you reveal now, this is about ancillary issues, issues not related to the budget, as the ANC puts it. How do you respond to people who are saying your negotiating tactic is purely unprincipled?
Look, the ANC keep trying to dominate the conversation. We've been saying from the start that South Africa does not have a revenue problem. It has an expenditure problem. The proposed budget, if you take the 2025 numbers and you compare those to the 1995 Nelson Mandela government budget, and you inflation adjust that 95 budget to 2025 money, this budget is 3 times bigger. And it's 2 times bigger than the Mbeki budget was. And the Mbeki budget already had social grants baked into that budget. And the economy then grew by 5 to 6% a year. The ANC their policies have resulted in a 0.8% economic growth, the latest numbers that we've got. What we are quite simply saying here is that VAT is a measure of the failure of ANC policy. If you have to increase that to keep the system running, then you've completely missed the mark. And we can't keep dancing around the edges of the actual issues that's bottlenecking our economy. The DA has suggested a politically neutral 6-point plan to turn the economy around and get it going. And that includes not having tax increases in there. But it also includes many other things, including some of the things I've now mentioned, such as the devolution of rail and ports. So the ANC must catch up to 2025 global economics and start focusing on the things that will make the rocket ship take off, instead of bottlenecking it. And we have to ask, whose interests are they protecting so vehemently? Why are they so opposed to finding inefficiency in our spending? Because it can't be the people who they're now trying to tax more. It can't be poor South Africans' interest. Whose interest is it? Just quickly touch on what Mbalula Mbalula had to say there. He keeps using the word transformation, and I'm just not sure what he means by that. Does he mean economic growth that has effectively stagnated for the last decade? Does he mean the masses of people that are unemployed? Does he mean the vast majority of South Africans whose house values deteriorate year on year? And does he mean social grants that haven't kept up with inflation? Is that what he means with transformation? Because those are the policies that they've espoused and implemented when they had unfiltered access to state power. So I'm just not sure, again, what he means with transformation. But what I can tell you is the DA is suggesting politically neutral alternatives to get this budget to take off. There were signs of hope in the budget that's now been proposed, including that we're doing infrastructure investment, which creates jobs in the short term and creates an environment for the economy to grow in the long term. There are things that we can work together on. The DA remains committed to the GNU. As we've said from the start, we don't want to embarrass the ANC. We don't want to have a public spat with them. But they cannot keep behaving like they're a majority party when in fact they control 39% of the votes in parliament. They will need to consult with their partners. They will need to take on board suggestions, and suggestions made in good faith to try and get South Africans employed, to make government spending efficient, and to grow the economy to a place where it was growing 5 to 6% a year under sensible policies and leaders that cared for the people.
Dr. Mark Burke, let me thank you very much for your time.